Well, hi again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of 100 Yards of Football. But we've got an original here for you. We've got a first, and today will be the first day that we have the sporting page with Bob Case. Bob has agreed to join us along with some special friends that he has. And the first one, by and large, you're going to love just as much as Bob does by the end of this show. But in the meantime, I want to mention the Nine Golf. If you're looking to work on and improve your golf game, please take the time to consider using the virtual experience. The9golf.com, Nine, spell it out. You can get tips on ball speed, exit velocity. You can view your own shots. It's videotaped right for you. You can get that done on the TrackMan 4 system or the Golf VX. The virtual viscosity of the ball, where your feet are placed, all of this is top tech information that you can use to help your game. Their first inaugural fall tournament is September 6th. You can sign up. There'll be 3 rounds guaranteed, some fantastic prizes and food, but the virtual experience is going to be taken over to where you can play against guys all over the country. That is where golf is going if you want to stay indoors and out of the 100-degree heat. We're also brought to you today by the Lee Haney Games. On November 1st, Lee Haney, yes, Mr. Olympia, 8-time champion, along with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Ronnie Coleman, multiple Mr. Olympia champions, has the Lee Haney Games. The bodybuilding is a Mr. Olympia qualifier, but there's also a deadlift. There's a fitness for kids. There's a dance competition. Cornhole, you name it. You can participate or just go to LeeHaneyGames.com for assistance. And there's a charity golf event at the Country Club of Gwinnett, help raise money for underprivileged kids. That's what Lee is all about, and we are happy to have him be a part of the show. Well, Bob, you and I met a couple of months ago. Then we had you on a show a few weeks later, and it is striking to me how quickly that you've agreed. I want to take the handcuffs off and let you out of the rubber room, but I'm not going to do it till we're done with the show. But thank you so much for being here. I look forward to this show and all of the amazing people that you know, the great stories that you can tell.
Well, thank you, Harper. It's an honor to be here, and with actually my best friend in my whole life, and my new best friend, Harper. So it's really an honor to be here.
Well, we want to thank you. And today's guest is a 21-year veteran in the major leagues. I can't say enough about how special and unique that is. There are very few people in the world that have ever experienced the type of success that Darrell Evans has. Darrell, you're a World Series champion. You've won at all levels, the highest that you can compete at, either junior college, high school, obviously in the major leagues. Welcome to 100 Yards of Football and obviously the sporting page with Bob Case.
Hey, Harper, great to meet you again, too. And, Bob told me about coming on and talking to somebody. The great thing is somebody that knows sports. And even though you weren't probably born back then, but you were around and you love the history of sports. And that's always something we always love seeing, because we're running out of people that are like that. So it's my pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you much. Born on May 26, 1947, in Pasadena, of all places. Darrell, there's a little old lady of Pasadena. Probably when you were a teenager, you found out about that. Jackie Robinson, the Rose Bowl, of course, every year. That's a place to be. And I think Eddie Van Halen, Alex's brother, went to the same high school you did. Talk a little bit about what it was like for you growing up in Pasadena, especially with two parents that love sports, participated in it at a high level themselves, and how that was passed down to you.
Well, at John Muir High School, the tradition was there, of course, like you said, Jackie Robinson and all the other great athletes that went there. So that was just a kind of a given. Going to school, it was a big deal, but we didn't think it was that big a deal. It was just we got to be a part of that, and then having the Rose Bowl right there, with the biggest football event, one of the biggest events in the country, perhaps more emphasized back then too. That granddaddy of them all, the whole thing like that. So it was wonderful. I didn't I didn't really know what was going on outside because there was so many great things going on there. One of the things I tell people about is that, I got to meet people that were there for their bucket list coming to the Rose Bowl game every year. My grandparents lived like 2 blocks from there, so we would go down for the parade. And that was the first time they ever bought us. People from Michigan, Ohio, and every place else would. So they were so happy to be there. They'd buy you a beer and want to talk about the place. So it was a magical place growing up, and something I probably didn't realize how great it was until later on, of course, when I got to go and see the rest of the country. So just
Darrell,
fun.
is it fair to say, Darrell, that the folks from Michigan, Ohio, Minnesota, Illinois, when they would come out, they're wearing basically a T-shirt and you're in an overcoat because it's a chilly morning, and they're going, "This is great. It's 50 degrees warmer here than it is where we came from."
Yeah, it's hard to believe that. Later on, of course, I got to see, and I lived in Michigan for 5-6 years. Saw what really cold was, and obviously, yeah. But like you said, it was a bucket list for all these people. It was once in a lifetime thing that they had saved up, and they, were going to go back and tell their family what it was. So it was an exciting thing that they brought to it too. And then when I went played for the Tigers, and I saw what kind of tradition there was, completely different from Southern California. I mean, obviously the teams weren't around as long, but the Tigers for 100 years and stuff. And I ended up marrying a girl from Michigan, and found out how important sports was to them. All the kids grew up and they all were on Michigan or Michigan State Day. And I always say, it's the greatest sports sports town in the country, because they draw 110 at Michigan and 100, almost 100 at Michigan State on the same day, and everybody was wearing their colors. So it was a great. I mean, that just doesn't happen anywhere. At UCLA and USC, they don't play on the same day because they can't draw compared to that. So they brought that excitement, and I guess it made us feel even more special, where we got that from somebody, from strangers that we didn't know about.
Yeah, and the Joe Louis Arena, Cobo Arena, they love their basketball there.
Everyone.
It's unbelievable how much of a hockey. They call them hockey town. They will fill that building out every time, whether they're winning or losing. It's amazing sports town.
Well, yeah, and it was they hold the all-time record for the Pistons. They averaged like almost 35,000 people for basketball there, because they had the Silver Dome, and people would just. And of course I got to go there, especially in Detroit, when the bad boys, they're beating up the Lakers and the Celtics that nobody ever thought could happen. And at the same time, the Hearns and Hagler, and Joe Louis is from there, so it's all well-rounded and stuff. And like you said, even though the weather is so bad sometimes, people come out, they don't care. It's just part of the whole thing. It's just a hearty bunch of people that care about and love their sport so much. So it was going, like you said, Motown, hockey town, and it was really great, because even the players on the other teams, we all supported each other, and I guess that probably happens somewhat in most places. But when you got 4 major sports and everybody you look up, and then you got people from Barry Gordy and Smokey Robinson and all those people, they're all at the games, so they took so much pride in being from Detroit. And then normally you'd be watching on TV, and even till this day is like, oh, Detroit, it's not a good place to be, but that wasn't the case at all.
Yeah, no, we did a special, Vincent Turner and I, a little while ago. Lem Barney was a backup singer for Marvin Gaye, and they all get, and Otis Redding, just guys that all hung out together, and they love sports.
Yeah.
Those guys love music, and what a great combination in that time, specifically in history, the late 60s or maybe even into the early 70s, just a magical moment.
Well, they always like you said, people are hanging out, so you could walk into any bar, any place, and with you'd meet somebody famous, but they didn't feel like they were famous. They were representing Detroit. That was kind of cool. I lived there, like I said, and I found that out. They had so much pride, and nobody knows. I mean, it's such a beautiful place,
Yeah.
and so much water. Canada's right across. It's just something. Unless you've been there, you kind of don't know about that. And then it was so incredible to win a World Series anytime. Of course, how much you treasure that and how much it means to everybody, but how much it means to a place that hadn't won for so long and was so thirsty for it and had waited so long, so patiently, and never left. And when I see them right now, when you see the Lions games and you go, oh my God, yeah, the people are just going crazy. So they want it to happen again, and being a part of that is just you can't describe that. That, and they hang around for you. Everybody knows you. Everybody's polite. Everybody's just patting you on the back all the time. I don't ever remember getting booed there, and there was a couple of instances in the playoffs where I would have booed myself, and some of my teammates were booing me, but the fans weren't. So it's like, hey, get them tomorrow, and the beautiful sign. Yeah, and at that time that was when they started the wave. They were. I mean, it was just such a great identity for those people. And of course, now they can look back and go, yeah, you know what, the greatest team in Detroit history, and they got to be a part of it. So we just had our 40th reunion of that, and what a special moment. And it was so fun to see the same fans, of course, and they just thirst for having, and they require you to be good people because that they bring you in, they take care of you, and also they expect you to represent them right.
Well, Darrell, I'll be honest with you. I played in Philadelphia, and we got booed
Not
off
quite
the
the
field
same.
when we're ahead at halftime on Monday Night Football. Now, I have played a couple of times at the Silver Dome, and if Barry Sanders hadn't run for 100 yards, there were a
Oh my
few
God.
boos, and they'd be ahead of us, or excuse me, we were ahead at halftime, and then when they came back, they went from sitting on their hands to having just an absolute great time. But again, good sports town for obvious reasons. If you don't mind, though, we'll talk about that in a little bit. I grew up in an era, and I'm imagining you did too, you and Bob both. Was the international signal for the game being over at the end of the day when the street lights came on? Was that a part of your life when you grew up?
Well, it was, of course, everybody, be home when the lights, come on. But the great thing about it is my parents' house they had the street light right out in front of them. So, it was okay now to come over and so everybody gravitated to our place. And of course they did that because, my mom played professional softball for a long time and all that kind of stuff. So she was kind of a celebrity. So there, I look back and I go, well, there was two things. I guess we had the street light. So, and everybody felt good because, okay, they're at the Evanses and stuff like that. And they wanted to have the celebrity, my mom, come out and play catch with them, or at least come out and play a little bit. So it was a magical place. So many things have to fall in place, but as a kid, that was a big part of it because it was never like, oh, you should have been home, you can't play anymore. I mean, we'd play until the only time my dad would get upset once in a while because we'd be playing wiffle ball mostly. And we'd hit the wire going over from the house to the street light. And every once in a while, he'd yell out and go, "Hey, that's enough of that kind of stuff." So it's like, oh, okay, all right, we're okay. And my mom would be out there going, "Oh, don't pay attention to him." So
If I was playing on a
magical.
If I was playing on a team against you, Darrell, and your mom came out and it was dinner time, would I want to get to her before she could finish her sentence and ask her to come pinch me, right? And then she beat you with that. How does that go down at the dinner table in a half hour?
Yeah, well, he didn't. it was like, but back then, of course, and I think somewhat now, it's like, hey, dinner's on the table at this time, and you got to stop everything. But that kind of went away after a while. It was like, okay, you and Dad, Dad, he'd be coming out, he'd sit outside and watch and everything too. He loved it. But then it was like, okay, we were supposed to have dinner at whatever, 7:00. Okay, you and Dad go in there and have dinner. We'll be in. At first, that didn't roll very good, but she understood because when she came out, all the kids wanted to go have dinner with us all too. So there'd be 10 kids in there. So after a while, I was like, no, your dad and I will eat, and you guys can go ahead and enjoy yourself. And
and plus it was
to feed the neighborhood.
It was the universe championship, right? Whatever that game was, it was for the championship of the entire galaxy, right?
Well, yeah, you grow up and you fantasize. Of course, that was a great thing. My dad worked in the space program and all that kind of stuff, and so there was always that imagination going on. So we fantasized. What was it like? I guess probably most kids or most boys did. You picked your favorite team and then you pretended you were that. And then we got sophisticated enough. It's like, okay, so you gotta learn how to hit like all 9 guys on the team. So, and the left-handed, right-handed, and so, yeah, every day was bragging rights, of course. And but then you couldn't wait to play that next day after school. Then it was, and that, I guess that thinking about that was the great thing was that everybody did the same thing all the time, and it was always involved in sports and baseball in particular. And you got really close friends that loved the same thing as you, and then you realize you kept getting more and more friends because more and more people felt that way. And they brought, like you said, brought their parents in, and they felt good about what was going on at the time and everything else. So as long as the street light, once in a while they'd have to fix it, and that kind of we'd have to hit play during the game. We had to play quicker, and then play at nighttime when we couldn't see. So I look back and I go, my eyes were kind of really bad. I had bad astigmatism and stuff until I started wearing glasses and contacts and stuff like that. I couldn't really see very good, so it was blurry. And I know that my eye doctor said, well, maybe that's why you could hit so well. You could hit with the ball looking blurry. And I was like, well, I wasn't going to tell anybody that, but that's kind of the way it was. And maybe in the long run, that's what really happened. And man, when I finally got to see really clear, oh man, that was like, this is way too easy now.
In looking at some of your pictures here on the left, I've got one of you very early. You were wearing number 29. Is this your rookie year? Are you in AAA here? And you're wearing glasses in your picture.
Yeah, this is was it R on the hat? Yeah, I think so. Let me see. Yeah, so Richmond? That must be. Yeah, that's Richmond. So that's AAA. The one with number 29. So when you I mean, as you move up and stuff, they give you a number. When I first went to spring training with the Braves and all that kind of stuff, it's like, well, football, same thing, man. The rookies get the high numbers, and that's kind of an indication that you're going to have to earn your status. And of course, you don't go in there and request or, oh yeah, I want this number. Well, yeah, that just, I mean, I guess it happens now a little bit, but certainly didn't happen last year. I just was treasured having a uniform. I mean, can you imagine with the Braves were my favorite team growing up, and then being able to, steal one out of the locker room after spring training or after the season was over with, and hanging up, and then they end up giving it to Bob pretty much. But to have that treasured thing for even 1 second was so great. So I hadn't seen that picture for a long time, and I kind of didn't remember. Okay, 29, because when I first got to the Braves that year, probably that year in spring training, they gave me number 2, which, and like I said at the time, was a great significance that I didn't really realize. So they were pretty much telling me, hey, we think you got a chance to make the team. I mean, it was a number 92, and baseball is different from it was like a defensive lineman. Now we don't have those kind of numbers. So number 2 is a good indication, and they treated me like that. And then I found out, they wanted you to be, even if I'd have been the 25th guy, they wanted you to be as good as you could be.
Yeah.
You had to be part of the team, obviously, and as an athlete, that's required all the time. So it doesn't matter whether you're playing every day or not. You might get your chance. Somebody gets injured, somebody gets habit, and they expect you to fill in and not have to worry so much about you. So starting out with going down to Richmond and taking whatever number they gave me. Of course, it didn't really matter because your identity, I guess, later on was kind of, I went from number, and then I got number 11 because my favorite number was number 41, which was Eddie Matthews, who was the hitting coach at the time, Hall of Fame, maybe, best third baseman of all time. He was my idol growing up. The Braves were my idol growing up. And here I'm in this locker room with him and Hank Aaron, and those guys are just incredible stuff. So, back then, and especially I wasn't, Bob can tell you, I wasn't, I was a lot different than maybe I am today. I'm a little more outgoing than I am today. I was pretty shy back then, so I didn't really care. I was concerned with how to keep my socks up because I had skinny calves, and before they told us about putting elastic on there or whatever, we had the old sanitary socks and everything else. And heck, if you ran and slid or whatever, they'd fall down. And I don't know why. I guess that was an embarrassment for us for a while. So that was one of the things I was concerned about when I first went into a major league locker room, was trying to figure out. And I know Hank had skinny calves, so I watched him. I didn't want him to see me watch him get dressed, but watched him put his socks on so I could catch up with him.
So you lessons learned even in the locker room from the greats that have skinny legs.
Important stuff.
But back those days, you didn't have just a pair of socks that were a solid color. You wore the sanitary socks, and then you had the stirrups. Were you a guy that loved to pull them up high and make you look like you were faster? That was a huge thing back in the late 60s and 70s.
Of course, you noticed that. Yeah. Well, I think it was more like, okay, who was your idolize? Who was your player that you liked? So you wanted to look just like it. Even like, when I was in Little League or whatever, and the American Legion, Babe Ruth League, and all that kind of stuff was like, okay, I wanted to look like Eddie Matthews all the time. So, he had his socks up pretty high, not extremely high. And then, we weren't allowed to deviate. It was given, I remember when Sparky Anderson had a big controversy with Cincinnati, the Big Red Machine. He wouldn't let them pull their socks up at all. And, you had
to wear black shoes for them too. You had no choice.
No stripes, no nothing. Yeah. It was like uniformity, I guess, was a stupid kind of way of thinking about it, but it was a rule. There were certain rules that you just went in, and I guess it went along with whoever the head coach or the manager was.
Yeah.
That was his choice. And Sparky was a little short guy, so I guess he thought he looked better in short socks than the tall ones.
Clean shaven, that was a big deal for Sparky too. You had to clean shave every day. The Yankees still have a deal. They just relented on that this past year.
Yeah, and it was like you were thought it was kind of a freak if you didn't, do what everybody else did. If you stood out, generally the people were like, "Oh, I don't like that. I want you to be like everybody else." So there's a lot to say for that, I think. And remember they had the team, the House of David or whatever. Remember they had beards or something. It was such a drastic thing, people either hated or loved him or whatever, but mostly hated him. So it's there's more emphasis, I guess, on individualism. But the problem is, like you said, no, it's not about individuals. It's not about everybody going different ways. It's all about everybody conforming and wanting to do that. And even like off the field, We got so many compliments in Detroit when I went to the Tigers after playing 15 years. The Braves and the Giants, and we got to the point of, and Sparky had a little bit to do with this. Like, hey man, we're gonna look nice off the field too, and dress up, and everybody looked the same, and everybody's, and so many compliments we got. I mean, I still remember them. People love that part of it. So we were doing what people love being in. I think now, and there's just so many things now. You got to put up with what's going on, and they call you names if you don't like it, but you always go back to going the good old days. That's what people remember you for.
You mentioned the stirrups and all that. Bob, do you have a pair of Darrell stirrups? I know you've got a few jerseys laying around. What about the stirrups?
Jock
No, I
strap.
think I missed the stirrups, but I've got just about everything else. And
Yeah.
and
it was
it's
kind
great.
of
Every time I look at it, see Darrell's in Dallas, but he's actually right with me because I got his pictures all over my office and his gear all around here. So I feel like I see him every day.
Yeah, it was
Balls,
fun
bats.
because
You got a little shrine going for you, Darrell. It's amazing. Bob sent me
yeah.
a picture. It's pretty nice. You should do something like that for yourself, don't you think?
Well, no, I'm gonna let him do it. Other guys, I
Darrell
got
was always. Let me tell you something, Harper. I've known this guy longer than anybody. Okay, always from the first time I met him as a quiet, shy, bashful kid at 15 to right now, he's always been humble, humble, humble. I never, ever in my life, and I've seen him mobbed with thousands of people around him. I've seen him in every situation for all these years. Every situation. Never did I see him big league anybody. Never did I see him refuse an autograph. Never did I see him not be the Darrell that his mom and dad, who were like my parents. His mom and dad kind of raised me because my parents were alcoholics. So I'd go to Darrell's house and his mom would fix food for me. His dad would go out with me. We'd spit out. But the point being, he learned that from them. I always say the fish stinks at the head first. But if you have good parents, they teach great values. And the mom I adored, Casey Stengel, went over to her house and sat and looked at her scrapbook. And we left the house, and Casey Stengel says to me, "They know their baseball. I love those people." So,
Wow.
in other words, the point being, Darrell never changed, and he's still exactly the same today. Now he's not as shy as he used to be. We used to say we'd say hi to him at the beginning of the season and goodbye to him at the end of the season. But now, he's a great interview. I've heard him being interviewed by everybody in the world, from Vin Scully to this person to that person, and he's tremendous. He's tremendous, and he's always remained Darrell Evans. He never changed. To me, that's his greatest. Not the 414 home runs, not the oldest man to lead the majors in homers, not all that stuff. Not the only, never being. What to me is who he is as a human. That's what impresses me. The kind of a human being he is, and I've seen him do so many things that would take me 20 hours to tell you all the wonderful things I've seen him do in his life. But they stay right here with me. And I've been around them all in my life, and Darrell knows that. I've been around them all. But this guy is as solid as a rock. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart.
Well, I would think at the end of the movie Saving Private Ryan, when the line goes, "Tell me I'm a good man. Tell me I'm a good man." Darrell, you passed the litmus test. Do you remember the first time you met Bob? Can you share that story with us?
Oh man, the first time, I don't know. He probably know better than me. But
Bob, I'll give it
Bob,
to you then. Give it to you, Bob. When did you meet Darrell for the first time that you said, "That's a
Okay, the
cool
first
dude, I
time
want to meet"?
I played baseball at Muir, but I didn't play my senior year because I was working for Casey and working for the Los Angeles Angels. No, I was working for the Angels as an equipment guy, so I couldn't. But I knew all the guys on the team. So I'm a senior, and everybody's saying it was the hardest thing in the world to make the varsity at Muir because we had 3,600 kids in 3 grades. So, I went out, I told you, for the JV team, there was like 100. I made the JVs as a sophomore, and it was an honor because there's only like 15 guys out of 100. So Darrell, in my 3 years, was the only sophomore that made the varsity at John Muir High School. And so I saw him, and I said, who's this guy playing third base? They said, Darrell Evans from Elliott Junior High School. And he was a sophomore, 15 years old, starting with the varsity at Mirror, which was unheard of. So that's when I first met him. And I was we became friends. And I remember sitting in the stands when he was a sophomore with his mom and dad, and he hit a home run to beat Burbank 5-4 as a 15-year-old sophomore. So I mean, I can remember everything his whole career, and the parents, thank God for me, kind of adopted me as part of their family, Darrell's mom and dad. So Darrell was like a brother to me, like a younger brother to me my whole life. And we have been, he was the best man at my wedding. He's been, he's my guy, always has been. And I'm just honored to know him and see how he's carried himself through good things and bad things. We're not always hitting 40 home runs. There's bad times and good times. And I've seen how Darrell's carried himself. And I always say, don't think I'm not watching. I've watched everything he's gone through, and he's just remained Darrell. And what else? What better thing would you say about somebody?
Yeah. Well, I guess, Darrell, a lot of it hard work that, wiffle ball. Usually a wiffle ball would start for you if I'm a right-handed pitcher and it looks like it's going in the ocean, and then it curls back and it ends up in the strike zone, or it hits you in the ear or something like that. Learning how to play at a really competitive level, just in the streets with your buddies and all that kind of stuff, does that make it easier for you as a junior hire, as a little leaguer, as a pony leaguer, and then you go into John Muir as a sophomore and you go, it's not easy, don't get me wrong, but you get it. You've got the skills, you got the fundamentals, you got the techniques, and there's a coach nowhere in the country that would want to have you on the field as a sophomore. Was it easy for you back in those days?
Well, you know what? Nothing's easy, but you're not scared of it because, like you said, one of the big things. I think I told you before. When growing up, I had to, because my mom and so much of my family is on professional baseball, and everybody loved it. And heck, when you had the reunions or the weekend picnics and stuff, everybody from the grandparents to the little babies that were sitting there couldn't play yet, they were sitting there watching their moms and dads play. So it was something that was there wasn't anything better to do, I guess, putting it that way. And I had to learn, one of the first things was I had to memorize the rule book, the baseball rule book. My dad always said, hey man, if you're gonna love something, you better know things about it. And I was like, yeah, you're right. So I would get quizzed all the time when he'd come home from work, and it wasn't one of those things. I'll wait till your dad gets home when you're in trouble. It was from my mom was like, oh, hey, you know what? Dad's got a really special question for you today. You better know it. I was like, that was scarier than everything. So anything else was pretty easy because when you're in the front yard playing that wiffle ball, and they're 20 feet away from you throwing, whatever, 80 or maybe 90, or, when you get up to 100 miles, the reaction time was the same. You're right. That's a good perception thing because it was like, and then we had to make it harder. We got the little golf ball wiffle balls, and I guess it wasn't hard enough for the wiffle ball to curve and all that kind of stuff. And then we had the little golf ball wiffle balls. And then we had those little thin bats, those little plastic thin bats. So
the little yellow tubes.
Yeah,
they were basically broomsticks. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess you couldn't. We were trying to make it harder at it. I guess at the time we thought that, but now I look back and go, yeah, it wasn't hard enough. So I guess you're right. I never had trouble hitting the ball. I remember, my scouting report. One of the scouts was that I was the best he'd ever seen at putting the bat on the ball, that I swung and missed less than any guy he'd ever scouted. And but that was, like I said, I guess it was a learned kind of deal. And at the same time, it was a learned, like, okay, which pitches can you hit and not to swing at that one, and try to recognize all that kind of stuff. And that came from wearing out Ted Williams' book, the Science of Hitting, which was more like a magazine kind of deal. But there was in the middle there was a picture of him, and he was so good and stuff, and he wasn't arrogant. He was just so confident. But he had a picture of the strike zone, and he had a ball in all different areas of the strike zone all over. And he said, "This is what I hit if that was the ball." Now, there's so many other factors in doing that, but his point was, I'm going to hit 400 on all those balls that are in the middle. And, that one down and away, maybe I'm only going to hit 310. Well, for most people, it's like, oh, well, really? No, you wouldn't have hit that. But anyway, but I was young and impressionable and watching that. And of course, everybody said, who's the best hitter of all time? Ted Williams, still do, probably. But, so he put it in a simple way for me was that, hey, you only swing at good pitches to hit. And even in the strike zone, there's only good pitches to hit. So I got to the point of going, I didn't practice on just hitting the ball in the strike zone. I practiced on hitting the ball in my hitting zone, the one that I hit the best, up and down, low, and usually it's in the middle of the plate somehow. And you realize and go, you know what? The more you do that, the more you're going to hit the ball hard. Doesn't matter what level and all that kind of stuff. And to lay off the other ones, and they always talked about, hey, get a good pitch to hit. Yeah, I mean, here now, when they interview guys after they get a game-winning hit or a big hit or something, what do they say? Yeah, what were you thinking? I said, well, I was trying to get a good pitch to hit, take a good swing. That's exactly it. That's been going on for 150 years, 160 years.
Sure.
Now, of course, they don't talk about when the guy swings at a bad pitch, they give credit to the pitcher. And as soon as I got a hold of that book, it was like, no, nothing for the pitcher. As soon as he lets go of the ball, he has no control over anything. He's trying to throw it in a certain way, but he can't. And so when it's like Ted, and then Eddie and Hank, and it's like, I want to own that. I want to own part of that plate. That strike zone is mine, and it's danger zone. Because if I miss that pitch, it's my fault. It's not because you were good. So the more I get ahead in the count, the more pressure I put on him, and the more he has to throw it, even though he's trying to throw it on the corner. I was reading the other day, or listening the other day, of the College World Series, and Ben McDonald, the pitcher, big pitcher, he was doing a commentation, and they were going off on the stats, and I had the spin rate and all this stupid stuff, and it's like, spin rate. I mean, you have the time it takes to blink your eyes is the time that you have to decide whether to swing, where to put the bat, to hit the ball. So if you wrote that down or said to somebody, go, hey, if you like baseball and you want to be a good hitter, here's how you do it. They wouldn't ever do it because it's not something you think about doing, something you react to. So you keep doing it more and more, and more of that came into play where it was like putting him more with smaller tunnel. He's going to make that mistake. He only has to make them at once, and it's my responsibility, which is the best hitters are more consistent at hitting that ball. Hank Aaron was the best. I mean, he hit balls that weren't right down the middle all the time, but he hit other ones more often than others. But the one hanging pitches and balls down the middle, it seemed like he never missed them. And it becomes timing and all that kind of stuff. But it was such a great foundation for me. And then I could apply it, like you said, while we're playing wiffle ball in the front yard. You know what? And plus, I was lucky enough. So my elementary school, we would play after school on the asphalt playgrounds. We would play with a rubberized 10-inch ball. I think it was 10-inch. And we would play a game after school, 6 innings or whatever. And then I would go home, and then I would have a Little League game and go play in that Little League game. And then there was they had a league, a special thing for the best players in Southern California, around CJB, California Junior Baseball Association, which we played at night a lot because everybody was playing Little League. And then it was kind of like an all-star kind of league. And so I got to play 3 games in one day a lot of times.
Wow.
And so it was practicing your skills, I mean, practicing until they work. And plus, the higher levels you get, the harder it is because the pitchers are better, a little bit more control. But like Ben McDonald said, I finished that up with, he just threw out and he goes, the average pitcher in the major leagues misses his target by 11 inches, average 11 inches every pitch. So if you watch games on TV now, and you can watch them all, they show them all. You see where the catcher sets of his target. The pitcher, on average, misses it by 11 inches. So this is high, 11 inches. This is low, 11 inches. And if you're sitting on the outside corner, 11 inches wide is in the other batter's box. And then 11 inches mistake is right down the middle. So, they don't talk about that. I watch that and I see that. So, because otherwise it'd be impossible to hit those guys with, sometimes the guy's stuff is so good, but they miss enough. And if I don't include those balls, that they're not even close to my hitting zone, they're more than 11 inches. So they become an instant no swing. I don't think about it. Instant no. I'm on, I would try to be, so I tried to be more and more aggressive as I got older. I learned, no, I'm more and more aggressive, which might sound like, well, I'm going to swing at more pitches. No, I was more and more aggressive to make that zone smaller, knowing that it didn't matter that these guys were older and the more experienced pitchers. Didn't matter. They couldn't throw the ball where they wanted to any better than some little league pitcher can. So it was a progression. It kept me from being scared or, I was apprehensive facing guys. I mean, your idols, it's Bob Gibson and Carlton and all those guys and Tom Seaver and everything, but I never was, I wasn't ever even apprehensive. I was excited about seeing, what do you got better than everybody else? You're the best pitchers in the history of baseball, but what do you got better? You still have to throw it over in that play, and so it's all up to me and how I time it. It's all up to me to be patient and not be so excited to go, it's Tom Seaver, it's Bob Gibson. I got to go and swing, put the ball in play. Because he's going to strike me out, embarrass me. I never felt that, I guess, because I'd had the success before. And I'd learned from the masters, from Ted Williams' tips, and then being in the big leagues with Eddie
Hey,
Matheson.
Harper, he had 8 home runs off Tom Seaver. Can you imagine? He had 8 home runs, 8 home runs off Tom Seaver. And his first home run was off Bob Gibson. And I didn't want to interrupt, but I got to tell you, all this talk about Ted Williams, he's too humble to tell you he's in the Ted Williams Hitters Hall of Fame in Florida, which is a really amazing list of sluggers.
Yeah, another elite thing. You mentioned something about Ted's book that fascinates me. Anyone who's any good at all would take a middle pitch and say, that's right, that's my favorite pitch. You're not always going to get that. Did the book help to show you that there were other ways to learn how to hit bad pitches or learn how to make a good situation out of a bad pitch? Perfect pitch for you, Darrell, would be middle, right? But then what if they go low and away? You got to learn how to hit that ball just as equally well as you hurt. So you're working on your weaknesses. Is that a fair assessment?
No, just the opposite. I don't work on my weakness because I'm going to try not to swing. I'm not going to swing at that ball until there's 2 strikes. So that was kind of the whole point. It's like, no. Doesn't matter what the count is. I still know that on average, this guy, I didn't know what the stats were and maybe they're right or wrong or whatever. But, with all the stuff they do now, they track every pitch was, okay. There's times, certainly there was times where you just go up there and somebody just throw 3 perfect pitches. And, the third pitch, you can still hit it, but you can't hit it the way you want to hit it. And, you realize after a while, it's like the higher you go up, remember, like Eddie Matheson, one of the first things he told me, he asked me, well, where are you trying to hit the ball? When I first came in the major leagues, I just hit 360 in AAA. So they knew about me. They knew that I could hit. They had never seen me before. But kind of, so we're down in the cage the first day and everything. And here I got my idol, the guy I loved growing up. He's going to be the hitting coach, and he's only 39 still. And he is just excited. and grabs me and go, "Hey kid, you're with me all the time." I was like, I mean, we didn't have cell phones, so I couldn't call people and go, "Oh my God, can you believe Eddie Matthews talked to me?" And, let alone. So he took me on that gate, and he threw me BP for about 5 or 6 pitches, and then he stopped and he goes, "So where are you trying to hit the ball?" And I had never been told to hit the ball up the middle, which is kind of what people always say, and I because I never understood that. Like you were saying, I'm trying to hit the ball up the middle all the time. It's like, well, why? And I assumed that it was like, well, there's more holes up the middle, but not really. And so Eddie put it succinctly, like, so who's the best infielder? It's the shortstop and the second baseman, probably the second best with more range. They play deeper. You got the pitcher in the way, and you got in center field the Olympic sprinter, and that's the farthest part of the park. So, as Eddie would put it, why in the hell would you do that? Why would you
Yeah.
hit it to them? But nobody explained that to me. Nobody. So it was like, and then he goes, "Listen, here's what I want you to do. Don't change a thing. I just want you to aim to right center where the real hole is, so that when you're the point about hitting up the middle, I guess, is just go, well, if you're late, you hit it the opposite way. If you're a little early, you pull it. But you know what? I mean, in a blink of an eye, that's almost impossible to think about doing that. But so I set myself up a little bit differently, a little more open, so I could aim to hit when I did everything perfect, timed everything perfect. You were, tight end, but then you were the long snapper. I'm certain there were days where you didn't even close your eyes. It was like, oh, everything's going to work out good. And then there was other days that you couldn't do it perfect. Well, that's the same way as baseball and hitting, especially. You realize, how come I'm not doing it the same way? But I had a reference to go back to. Okay, this will make things better, and so I could go back to something like that. So it was an adjustment constantly, but it was a positive adjustment. Nobody wanted me. I mean, I had a job. I had my job when I got to the Braves, and I'm a young kid, and I'm not sure I can play up there. Don't know how much I can last. And then they put me hitting in front of Hank Aaron. So my job was to get on base for Hank Aaron or hit a home run. They didn't care about what my average was, didn't do. They were upset if I swung at a bad pitch because they told me to. Another thing was, well, it's all about not making an out. So if the pitcher doesn't throw it over the plate, 4 times, you're not making it out. And I'm giving a chance to the best hitter in the world to hit with a man on base.
Yeah. You're
So
learning. Did you have to learn to walk? Was that something that was different for you in the majors?
no, I kind of always had a really good eye, and what basically really worked out was that I got ahead in the count all the time. So I got more fastballs. And when I got to the big leagues and stuff, and especially I remember when I went to the Giants and stuff, the players, and after I got traded to them, some of the players would go, how come you're always ahead 2-0, 3-1 all the time? And I go, oh, aren't you watching? I'm not swinging at the same pitch as you are. I'm not swinging at the borderline pitch, so I'm not looking at them. So they look farther off the plate than they really are. And after a while, it was great because I got a reputation with the umpires, where they would, they liked me, and I guess, and so they wouldn't, a close pitch. Most of the time, it went to me, depending on who the pitcher was. Of course, it was like it was Latin Maddox or Glavine. Yeah, that pitch outside like this was like, what are you calling that for? Well, it's them. You're not as good as them. So I learned how to do that. But my big key was getting to a fastball. And the way to get to a fastball is get ahead in the count. So you force them to do it or walk me to pitch to Hank Aaron. So it was a pretty ideal place to be in the middle of, and it was my job to get better and good enough. And like Eddie, be dangerous. You could to be as and I look back and I led the league in walks 3 times hitting in front of Hank. So it worked. You know, they were still scared of me. And after a while, you get that confidence of going, oh, yeah, okay, who's hotter? You know, is it me or Hank or whoever's? That's how games go, which I think the average fan, of course, doesn't know that. The teams know that which guy's hottest here.
Sure.
If we got to pitch to this guy or that guy, you know. And I look back and I go, you know, I'm very proud. The Dodgers, 2 back-to-back games, walked me with a base open to pitch to Hank, and he won the game both times. And I mean, I look back now and I go, wow, you know, Walter Alston was scared of me. Or, you know, the pitchers were scared of me at the time. And I guess they had a right to be that. You know, I hit 41 home runs and, you know, I was dangerous. So try to get back to that scenario again was always a great incentive. And I knew how to do it. I knew that not swinging, and I never said don't swing like I said. I was super aggressive and made my strike zone smaller. The more I got ahead in the count, the more it's like, come on, throw it right there. And as you know, as an athlete, after a while you picture this thing and then you see yourself hit, and it may not be the perfect pitch after you hit it, but your mind is so much, yeah, okay, it looks good, it's gonna look good. So you adjust to that maybe. Sometimes it doesn't work as good because of percentages wise, but you hit some pitches that you think, oh yeah, I thought they were right down the middle, but they weren't. You know, it's your mind puts you in a spot, and it worked enough where I could, you know, like you said, I could go back to my front yard where I had to hit the ball to left field, and I switched it a little bit, but I was so much better left-handed. So growing up, because the street was out to left field and second and third that way, and if we hit it straight away or pulled it, it was in the other yard, and there was a big dog over there. We had to go get the ball. So
you can't hit the ball in the dog yard.
Because it's not the worst thing about it's an out, but it's also you got to go in there and hope you don't get beat up in there. So I learned how to do that anytime I wanted to. But then when I got older and when I got in the pros, they didn't want me to do that. They wanted me to hit the ball out of ball.
Darrell, it's funny. There's a video on YouTube of a 4-minute and 50-second at bat that you had against the Red Sox. Bases are loaded. You guys are down, 4-2 or something like that. You probably know this. In the first pitch, you foul off, and it looked like weaker than Circus Lemonade. Then you foul one straight back. You take a ball, another foul, another ball. You hit one back to the press box. The guys in the press box were saying, hey, Fred almost caught that.
I should have hit that ball.
Then you hit another one that was weaker than Mookie Wilson's ball that went between Buckner's legs, foul by 3 feet. It looks like you are badly defeated. The next pitch, letter high, slightly inside, and it went in between the top of the fence and the second deck, grand slam home run. The fans didn't know what to do. It was such a surprise because the at-bat looked weak at first.
See, man, I'm glad you
waited for your pitch. You got it, and look what I can do now. How do you like them apples, kids? You know what I mean? Just a great at-bat.
Well, yeah, you know, it was, I just watched that too. It was fun watching those kind of things. Sometimes you don't remember a lot of that. You know, people go, well, do you remember what? And I was like, no, because you move on. Yeah. And it's not because you did it before, but it's like you learn from that thing. But you're right. That was one of the at-bats where you say I missed the ball, but you know, it all comes down to, when we talk about hitting, all comes down to hitting a round ball in the center of a round ball with a round bat in the center of a bat. So you got about this much leeway, and you have to time it coming 90, 100, whatever. And it's moving not only forward fast, it's doing something. So if you thought about that, and you have to do it in the blink of an eye. So like I said, it's a learned response where there's sometimes you're in that zone where you're like, it doesn't matter. Come on, man. It's like Eddie Matthews or him talk about going, hey man, you know what? If they put if they shot a bullet out of a gun at me, he goes, give me a couple times the time, and I think I get it. So it's like it's not the velocity isn't that important to us because that's just timing. That's just like going, okay, I'm going to start earlier. I'm going to get ready earlier. It's like I'm sure when you were snapping and stuff, the punter or whatever, or the field goal, they had to know, okay, how hard is this coming back? And if it was different, it would change things. Same thing about hitting, but that's not really. I mean, it became to the point I'm not going to be late because if I'm late, I have no chance. As you watch the games now, when they're it's just disgusting. Guys get ahead in the count and they fire one over the other dugout or your. It's a wasted swing. It's a wasted everything. It puts their bat, instead of getting that one, they got a good pitch to hit. And they didn't do anything with it. So it was a learned response to do all that kind of stuff. And during that at bat, I was feeling really good. And there was a really good vibes at the time. I mean, it's hard not to feel good when you got 55,000 people screaming and yelling and everything. And you get to be in that situation that you dream about your whole life. And it was a really important thing. The Red Sox ended up winning in '86, and we came in real close. I mean, 1 or 2 games out. So that every at bat was so important. And when you come through like that, but you know what? I can remember that at bat was like, okay, I'm gonna get a good pitch hit. I did in the first pitch, and that's why I didn't hit it very good, or whatever. But I wasn't feeling bad about it. It was just I went back to going, oh man, that wasn't a good pitch to hit. When you first come up to home plate, you got 3 strikes, so you got at least 3 pitches, and you got to remember that you can't just go up there and survive. You got to get good pitches to hit. So when that first one I pulled fire, I was out in front a little bit. And then I fouled one back, and that was a good pitch to hit. And I look back and go, man, I should have crushed that ball, but I didn't. And then he threw me a breaking ball that was out in front of him a little bit. But he wanted me to speed up, or he wanted me to be aware of throwing a breaking ball. I know that Tim Lawler, for some reason, I don't know why, he wanted to pump me fastballs inside all the time, no matter what. It was amazing. And after a while, you get to know the pitchers. You know them. You know the catchers. I hit off the catchers a lot because in a 3-game series, you got the same catcher back. They call the same thing. So they get you out the first game a certain way. They got a tendency to go ahead and we're going to try to pitch him that way. But they can't depend on that pitcher who's going to miss by 11 inches. So all those kind of factors come in. And you know what? You throw it out. You don't go, oh, I got to put this ball in play. I can't strike out. I remember at that time, I was like, man, I just missed a couple. He's going to throw it again. He's going to try to throw it again. I remember when I fouled the pitch before, straight back, and it was wet, and he was out there. Man, I was pissed. And even my teammates always tell me, go, yeah, man, what a great at bat. And they could tell you I was involved in the whole thing. But he was down fixing the spikes because they were wet. He didn't see, maybe, I don't know. I was just kind of trying to bait him and go, come on, man. You thought you got away with that last pitch because I missed it and fouled it back, throw it again. And he did. And I was, it wasn't the longest one I ever hit, but I hit it pretty good. Yeah. And, just the elation that sets you free for a long time, and you run around those bases where you're not even touching the ground, and you just suck in all the excitement from all these fans. Like you said, I grew up with all those Tiger fans at the Rose Bowl, and I got to be a part of them just going crazy in an important game. It's you can't set yourself up in there, and then you can't put yourself in a position of being positive and for good things to happen. But you live for those days, and when that happens, man, it just boosts every other time up. Then now it's like I'm gonna get in that position again.
Yeah, excuse me, Darrell. I'm sorry, Bob. Do me a favor. Talk a little bit about the maturity level that you saw in Darrell. You mentioned a 15-year-old kid that was trying out for the varsity and makes it. And now we're talking about, breaking down specific pitches and the battle, that chess match that you have in between a pitcher and a batter on every time, every plate appearance. What was it like for you being involved with Darrell's career and understanding that, I remember this guy when he didn't even have to shave, and now he's in his 10th, his 15th, his 21st year in the big leagues.
Well, I consider it like almost like a miracle to know a guy, a young kid, and see him mature over the years and look at the things he accomplished. Darrell will be the last person in the world to tell you all his accomplishments. That's who he is. But the things that I saw him accomplish, the people I saw him hit home runs off of, I think he's hit home runs off 13 Hall of Fame pitchers, and some of them multiple times, including Phil Niekro, who was his teammate. He killed him, which was hilarious. They were best friends and teammates. And then when Phil got traded, I think Darrell hit 7, 8 home runs off him, which was really funny. But the point being, I just watched him mature. And, Darrell always, since I've known him all these years, he had a calmness about him, a calmness. And I've often wondered if that calmness equated to being a great athlete, just a great athlete. I mean, Darrell Evans, he's got all these accomplishments, 404, he still holds a record for assists for a third baseman, and he was in the double plays and blah, on and on and on, things that you would never know. When he retired, he was number 6 in walks with 1,605 walks, in all time when he retired. So, I see all this, and I just equate it to, I think a lot of it is his mental and physical and spiritual makeup is what made him who he is. And my life, if I hadn't come across Darrell, the people that Darrell introduced me to that became life, like Hank Aaron, for example, I met and became dear friends with Hank Aaron because of Darrell Evans and Eddie Matthews and all these guys. And a lot of the players I represented later on were teammates of Darrell's, ex-teammates and stuff. So, I'm smart enough to know in my life, I said this before, I believe there's angels that come into your life. When I met Darrell's dad, I was drinking and drunk all the time, and they never gave up on me. They never gave up on me. So Darrell's father was like an angel to me, and, they never judged me or looked down on me. They took me under their wings, and Darrell's uncle was one of the guys that got me sober. So to me, to see how the accomplishments are great, but it's how he carried himself through them all, which is just unbelievable to me. I'll tell you a story. One day, this is really a good story. Darrell was out here, and he was spending a few days at my house. So we go out and have dinner, and we come home, and we turn on the television. I have this big TV in the living room, and we turn it on, and who are they interviewing? Darrell's sitting right next to me on the couch, and they're interviewing Kirk Gibson. And Kirk Gibson said there, it was so great to see that, sitting next to Darrell. He said, we would have never won in '84 if we hadn't gotten Darrell Evans. He made the difference. Coming out of Kirk Gibson's mouth on an interview, and I'm sitting right next to Darrell listening to it. I mean, what are the odds that we come back from dinner, turn on the TV, and it's Kirk Gibson saying that we would have never won the World Series without Darrell Evans? Now, and I know what the players thought of him. Let me just tell you this: never on the deal. I see these guys, and oblique, and of this, and of that, and of this, and they got 10-year contracts. They don't care if they miss a month because they're paid millions and millions of dollars. I saw Darrell Evans in 1982 with the San Francisco Giants with a broken index finger. This finger was broken. You know what he did? He took an ice cream stick and put tape around it and kept it out of his glove and played third base. I saw him play. I mean, this guy, I remember when he'd come to L.A., this Charlie Deal was the next ball player. He said, you guys are ruining Darrell's career, getting him drunk, staying out all night. Listen, one day he would come to L.A., we'd go to this place called the Night Watch. This is hilarious. We would stay out in the Night Watch. Darrell's buddy, Tom Sherlock, one of his teammates, ran the place. It was a great hangout in Pasadena. Everybody went there. So we would drink till 6, 7 in the morning because they'd keep the bar open when they'd close at 2. And I remember driving Darrell to the Sheraton West Hotel at 7 in the morning, dropping him off, and he was at the ballpark at 1 o'clock fielding ground balls. That's Darrell Evans. You know what I'm saying? So in other words, he had resiliency. He could play, and he was one of the more. All his teammates loved him. Every single teammate he ever had, they loved him on the Braves. They loved him on the Giants. He was the leader of the Giants. I think he was the captain there at third base, and the Tigers. What I just told you, what Kirk Gibson said, you don't need to say anymore.
Okay.
So, it was an amazing thing, and to see him hit 40 home runs and become the oldest man in history to hit 40 home runs. And he also was the first man in history to hit 40 home runs in the American and National League.
Yep.
So, on and on and on. But how did he do it? Just like you're seeing him right there. He was the same level. No highs, no lows. Just like this.
Yeah. And Gibby ended up 4 years later joining the Dodgers in pretty much the same situation. They would never have won the series. Now, he never even got there without him. Hey, Darrell, did you learn how to tape the electrical tape around a wiffle ball and then just apply that to the splint in your broken index finger?
It was no big deal.
Again,
it was like we did, like you said, we did that in the front yard all the time.
Harper, if you go to Darrell Evans' house in Altadena on 617 Mariposa, if you go there today, 2025, you go on the grass in the front lawn, and there's a big hole that's been there for 60 years.
Yep.
Well, that was home plate, right, Darrell?
Home plate. That's right. Yeah.
And the hole's still in the grass.
Yeah, that was, well, I learned all of that stuff, I guess, whatever but I had this thirst of knowing, and my dad never missed a day of work in his life, and he was such a, I mean, the people loved him. He passed away, and all these people came to his funeral that I didn't know, and every single one of them was like, your dad was the best, and it was such a, it was such a thrilling thing, and meant so much and everything like that. But it was because he was loved by everybody. He was such an inspiration and so smart and all kinds of things, in the space program and everything else. But he was level-headed, and he loved to argue, and he made you think. So many times we would argue or whatever, and other people.
Did he love to argue or debate? I'm thinking it's debate.
No,
argue. Give me your side of the story. Tell me. Build your case, right, Darrell?
Yeah, no, argue. No, it was like loud and yelling. And if you were somebody that didn't know what's going on, you'd think that, oh man, guys are ready to come to blows, and they were going to, hate each other forever. But that was the way men acted back then. He was just out of the World War II, and all his friends were and everything. And they told you like it was. They didn't sugarcoat anything. So they expected you to make a judgment. They expected you to learn. And if you said something stupid, they tell you that's freaking stupid, and then they tell you why. So it was great because we're all laughing because we know how fun that is. That's what men do. We kid each other and sarcasm and the whole bit, and then then we shake hands and we're best buddies and all that kind of stuff. Because we respect people that make changes and listen to experts. And he was an expert at so many things to so many people. So, but the biggest thing was he loved his job so much working at JPL in the space program, and they still have his desk there from originally back. I mean, that's like having a clubhouse where you got this guy's his locker still there. I mean, this is what my dad's thing. So he was that guy. He was that guy that just exuded everything. People would come to him, they'd ask him questions. I just sat there and soaked it up. I mean, and it was so fun because they were my parents, but at the same time, they were smart, and they let me know what their opinion was all the time, or their opinion of my buddies or my supposed buddies and stuff, where it's like, hey, you know what, that guy doesn't need to be over here anymore. We don't like the way he acts. And I was like, oh, okay, all right. And, then it was my responsibility to tell the kid, which wasn't fun. But I learned so much because never missed a day of work. So when I got what I love doing, he always told me, hey, you love something, you better go full run. Don't ever back off. Appreciate you get to do it every single day. And that's what I did playing ball, because once I got that uniform, like I was telling you before, once you get that uniform on, it's like, oh man, you made it, but you don't. But it's always that thing. Probably in football, same thing. It's hard enough to make it to get to the big league. The hard part is staying.
Yeah.
The hard part is staying. So you have to get better. You have to be, and when you're young, you just sit there and listen. They have them give you a bad time, and they're testing you to see if you can handle it or not, because you're one of 25 guys, which is the reason, during the season, of course, every guy is going to contribute something really good. Some more than others, obviously, but that 25th guy is important as anybody. And you got to, hey, come on, man. I know you're not getting so many bats and you're not going to play, but listen, you got to be ready, because when somebody gets hurt, you got to be in there. There's no excuses for that. So learning all those kind of things and being able to be selfish enough to go, you know what? I'm not going to let them pull that uniform off me. I'm not going to let them decide that. And
Yeah.
so and then people ask me when I retired and all that, and I go, I never retired. They just didn't give me a uniform, but I still could play. I
Yeah.
got released the last day of spring training because we had this deal about the owners would only wanted to pay 24 guys, so they cut the roster the last 3 days of spring training. And because I was 43 years old, I was the guy to go with the Braves, the same Braves that won 14 times in a row. I was the guy. Bobby Cox came over, brought me and Dale Murphy over there to teach the young guys how to play. And then he had to sit in front of me and cry and tell me I was released. And they knew I couldn't go to any place else because all the other teams had to release one guy. So
Right.
it was just all of a sudden. It wasn't because I couldn't play anymore. And that's one thing I can live with. I was like, no, you still can contribute. And as you get older and as you get more veteran player, of course, people look at you different. And it was like an advantage, because I was watching Hank. He was 38, 39. I was watching him. And you know what they try to do is, he's old. I could, some young kid would come in and go, I could throw a fastball by him. And it didn't really work.
Yeah.
So I wanted to be like guy. So I could see that. And I could see that, how much more every year, how much more my parents were more beloved by everybody, because they always had something to give. They were the perfect example for things. So what would have been the worst thing in my life would have been is to let them down. And I could have done that, I guess. I could have backed off and kind of gone, well, I can't do it anymore and all that. But it's not about doing it every time. It's about the presence. And I learned after a while, and Hank and Eddie doing, after I had a great year and getting 41 home runs in 73, kind of didn't have pressure on me at all, because that was when Hank was good to 700 and beating Babe Ruth and all that. But after the year, then remember Eddie's going, goes, man, now the hard part starts. And I go, what do you mean? And he goes, you just set the bar at an impossible place, and you're going to have to do the same thing every year too. So remember, we don't think that. The people on the outside think that. We know what you do, and it doesn't have anything to do with stats or anything like that. So I had gotten that, and I could see my dad and my mom, the way people thought of them. So it was like, yeah, that's kind of a fun place to be, where people talk good stuff about you, and and they come to you, and they at the last minute, and they allow you to get in their lives, and they tell you things that they wouldn't tell somebody else, and you become this veteran presence where it's like, you can say anything you want to, and but after a while it's like, somebody does some stupid thing on the field, not thinking or whatever, and nobody says nothing to them. A lot of times, now they don't want to be called out or anything. But I remember times where it got to the point finally, it was like, and Eddie used to tell me that when he became manager, he goes, hey, they listen to you. You better don't stop. We know you talk, and don't stop that. And I was like, oh, really? Yeah, okay. So,
Hey,
I
Darrell, real
called.
quick. real quick, I want to be respectful to your parents. You lost your dad in '84. Talk a little bit about what that was like for you on a personal level, and then still go out and have to go 1 for 4 every day when you have so much stuff that you need to take care of that has nothing to do with baseball. What was that like for you?
Hey, Darrell, tell them about seeing Dick at the World Series.
Yeah, well, it was so sudden. That was the thing, it was so exciting. '84 was so exciting. I was a free agent. I got to pick where I wanted to go, and people couldn't understand why wouldn't you want to go to the Dodgers because they had lost Steve Garvey to the Padres, so I could have played first base for my hometown team and stuff. But I think people probably didn't realize at the time, but I hated the Dodgers. I didn't like them. They weren't there when I was growing up, so I didn't really care. I mean, they were the first major league team there, but I didn't lock onto them like most people did. And then I got to play with the Braves and the Giants in that rivalry, and we hated each other. I mean, I hated the Dodgers because, and even in spring, even in the minor leagues, they all had their uniforms were clean. They all had them all pressed. They walked around prissy and all this kind of stuff, which was easy for us to hate them. And they were really good, so we kind of respected them, but we hated them. And that came up through the minor leagues, and then I was in the same division and all that kind of stuff. So I didn't have that kind of thing. When I went to the Tigers, and it was so fun because my parents used to go take their 2-week vacation, 2 or 3 week vacation, and we used to go a 2-week road trip, 4 different cities, which they don't do now. But we used to go to 4 different cities, so they would always go every year. They would go on a different road trip, so they could see all the ballparks. They love baseball so much. It was like a great experience for them. And after a while, they were around so much. All the players knew them, all the front office, everybody did. And in fact, when I was with the Giants, they took them on a couple charters, which is, never happened. So they were part of the team in a way. And and then I get a chance to go to the American League, which I had been 15 years nationally. They'd been to all the parks and they'd been all that. And then all of a sudden, now I'm going to American League. And they were so excited because back then, the whole parks were still around and all that kind of stuff. They were looking forward to that. And then, when I got to spring training, I got this call because I called my parents and was like, okay, you guys come on down. I got a condo in spring training. You guys come on down for spring training. Come on down, meet the guys and all that kind of stuff. And they used to love spring training because, you see 2 or 3 games a day. It was great. And my mom goes, well, I don't know if we're going to be able to make it. And why? And she goes, well, your dad's not doing really good. And it was the first time was a shock because my dad was invincible. Went to work every day. He never called in sick. He never was sick. He was, I'm sure, but we never knew he was sick. And just for this big guy to be all of a sudden, it was like, oh my gosh, it was just tragic because he was still, 62 years old. And it was like, I mean, he was so excited about me being in a different place again and getting to see that, like I said, the big deal was seeing the ballparks and being a part of that. So that went on and, I went through spring training. I'm on a new team. I'm trying to impress them. I'm trying to, do what they wanted me to do as being a veteran guy. And they expect me. They all thought I hit 40 home runs every year. It was like, no, I didn't. But that's what they thought. And that was a plus for them. So I didn't really, I had so much press. I had never had press like that before. But all of a sudden, I'm going to this team that lost to the Orioles by 1 game the year before. And the Orioles were world champions, and so these guys were expected to win. And then I was the free agent that everybody wanted at the time to go on there. So I was constantly pressed. Everybody around asked me, what do you think? And all this kind of stuff. So that was kind of okay because I didn't really have to think about it and find out what, I just didn't believe my dad wasn't going to be okay. And, he had colon cancer, and if he'd have had it now, he would have been okay. But, back then they didn't know as much, and he caught it too late. And it was hard because I didn't get to talk to him on the phone much. He was pretty incapacitated. And, it's like, it didn't feel right to go, you know what, I got to go home and talk to my dad and all that until, even though I had Sparky, who would have probably let, he wouldn't have felt, he would have let me do that and all that kind of stuff. But, I felt like I'm obligated there. And then, talking to him on the phone, and he asked me how it was and all that kind of stuff. And he goes, "Hey, listen, come on, they got you there for a reason, man. Go ahead and put them over the top." And, I'll never forget that conversation. But, and then it was like, it's I just, even now emotionally, it's like, I didn't get to see it. After all this time being supportive and everything else, and the ultimate, of course, is winning a world championship and him being there. But like Bob said, so he passed in June, and I came back, and they want me to do the eulogies. And I was like, wow, this is like, I mean, just to get over that whole thing and then have to talk about it. So I think it was one of the best things I ever did, though, is tell people really what I thought. And then there was all these people that worked with him and everything out there came up to me later on and went, "Oh my God, your dad was so awesome." And so that made it really special, of course. And there's nothing I could do about it. And try to protect my mom, and my family out there and everything else. But then, so at the end of the year, we win, and then we go to the playoffs with Kansas City, and I don't know, 20, 30 people came. They all wanted to come to the playoffs and World Series. My whole family, baseball, everything. They were all like, "Oh my God, we're gonna do this!" Yeah, okay. So they were all gonna stay at my house in Detroit. And but first we went to Kansas City. We were playing two out of three back then, and or yeah, three. And so we went to Kansas City for 2 games, and all these people came to the games, and I was like, "Oh, I had to get tickets," and it's just hard to get tickets. So they were all sitting, I guess, behind the first base dugout, and after the second game there, we won in like 14 innings, and we go home 2-0. Got to win one more game to get in the World Series. And after the game, I went over and talked to them a little bit because we were going home in a charter, and they all were flying home in a different whatever they're getting there in the morning. So I went over and said hi to Mom and all that kind of stuff. And then I talked to my brother and my sister-in-law, and my brother goes, "Hey, we saw Dad," and that just tore me up. I mean, what? And he goes, "Yeah, we saw him. He was sitting with three of his buddies. They all had their cardigan sweaters on, which is a dead giveaway. Same color and stuff." So they saw him from behind. They were sitting down in front of him, a little ways away. And I go, "Well, did you go down and talk to him?" And he goes, "No, we didn't want to because Mom was there, and we didn't want to. We didn't know if it was them for sure until later. We didn't want to do that." And I go, "Okay." And I go, "So what happened after the game?" And he goes, "Well, the last inning, you guys were rallying and all that stuff, and you got a couple runs, and then Kansas City was coming up, and we looked at them, looked out the seats, and they were all four were gone." And so there was no reason for me not to believe it. And of course, I felt it. And of course, that's what happened. That's what God does. He puts you in places, and He does things that you just marvel at
Hey,
and get
Harper,
to
I want to tell
enjoy,
you one
because
story about.
the best thing in the world was giving my dad an opportunity to go to World Series and be part of it. So,
Harper, I want to tell you a story about Dick Evans.
Please do.
Dick Evans, Darrell's biggest thrill, he hasn't told you this today, was when he made the All-Star team in '83, and they went to Comiskey Park, and they had all the former players come. And how about Dick Evans was down there with his crew cut, sitting with Moose Garland with a crew cut, Roger Maris with a crew cut. All Eddie Matthews loved Dick Evans. He loved him. And it was, Darrell said that was so great to see his dad down there with all these legendary guys.
Yeah.
And the next thing I'm going to tell you, I was fortunate to be a pallbearer at Dick's memorial, and I called him. the last time I ever talked to him, Darrell hit a home run. It was to win a big game. It was a big home run. And I called him in the hospital. And he says, I just stopped drinking. He says, Bob, I'm so proud of you. He could barely talk. He says, don't drink again. May God strike me dead in it. Anyway, I love that guy.
Well, you know what? Thanks, Bob. You know how much we loved you and how much everybody loved him. Everybody, and he loved everybody in it. And like you said, that All Star game, it was the 50th All Star game, so they brought back as many old timers as they could, and walked into the locker room with him. Luckily, I made the team. They flew with me from San Diego. I found out San Diego, and we went to go to Comiskey, Old Park, and all that kind of stuff. And I take mom and dad. And so the morning on Monday, we just had batting practice. And we used to have old timer game and all that. So I went in there early. Took my dad and my mom. Of course, my mom couldn't go in the clubhouse. She was mad about that. But so she sat outside by the dugout, and then my dad and I walked into the clubhouse, and here these guys are sitting over in the corner making a bunch of noise. And I look over there, and it's Eddie Matthews and Warren Spahn and Lou Burdett and Johnny Logan, and then like you said, Yogi Berra and Roger Maris and Mickey, and all these guys are sitting over. They're having it's like 10 o'clock in the morning, man. They're all having a couple of beers and they're yelling and screaming. They're having a ball as we walk in, and I look over there, and Eddie Matthews turns around and looks at me and looks at over, and he goes, "Hey, oh yeah, I was hoping you were going to be here." And I go, "Oh, thanks." And he goes, "Oh, not you. Hey, Dick, come on over." My dad's name is Dick. He goes, "Dick, come on over. I want you to meet my buddies." I mean, this happened. This happened. This is how. And Eddie used to love my dad because every time we go on the road and stuff, he'd send us up to the room, and we couldn't drink at the bars, and we couldn't, whatever, it wasn't strict or anything, but, and Eddie was, so when he first met my mom and dad walking through the lobby, and he goes, "Hey, Dick, come on over here, man. I'll tell you about your son." And then they became like best buddies. It was like, and then to have that happen, for Eddie to bring them over. So he took them over there, and they all got introduced, and then later on, when find them, they all went in the dugout, and they're all sitting in the dugout together, all like Bob said, with the crew cuts and everything. I mean, it's the greatest thing that didn't happen to me on the field ever, because it was put in a situation where it couldn't happen to anybody else. And later on, I got to see him. My dad, he was at the Yankees game one time, sitting in Yankee Stadium down the right field line when I was playing first base, and I noticed him in between innings, and I thought it wasn't just him; it was one of his buddies too. And I was far enough away because they were down the line, couldn't really tell, but I was like, "Oh my God!" And my dad, like I said, the one thing used to wear cardigan sweaters all the time, and he's big. He's big, bigger than Bob and I both, and it was like I couldn't run down there. I was playing first base. I wanted to run down there and see it was him. And the whole game, I got to just, everything in between innings and stuff. And I finally, he left and stuff. But I know it was a great sign, just telling me that, hey, you know what, I didn't miss out on anything. You gave me all these thrills, and we got to do this because we love baseball so much. And that's I mean, it was that, and that included my mom, who ended up living to 99 years old. Just recently passed, but I got to see all her stories. Then she used to tell me all her stories about when they used to grow up, and they went to Muir High School and Jackie Robinson and all that kind of stuff. So it was it was this great education, and it was a great tribute to them. And I didn't want to disappoint them. I couldn't be any other way. So I never had those thoughts of being, "Oh, I'm going to do this, I'm not going to do this, or I'm going to be this, or I'm going to take a chance of doing it." I just didn't. That just never came into my mind. And I'm sure that was a big part of it, was because that's the way they were. You know, they were just so consistent, and everybody knew what to expect. And if you didn't do it right, then you'd hear his big booming voice go, "Hey, what are you doing?"
What's going on here?
Yeah,
Hey,
yeah,
yeah,
and that's all we
yeah.
had to hear. You know, all out in the front yard going, "Hey, quit hitting the wire."
Hey Harper, I always told Darrell. Now think about this: if he had been the president of the United States, not Ronald Reagan, Darrell Evans, president of the United States, if he had been uh, invented a cure for cancer, whatever he had done, his parents couldn't have been more proud of him being Darrell, what he did, than if there's nothing else. If he'd been a rock star, a movie star, one of the Beatles, they were more proud of him. And that is what he will be able to take with him his whole life and afterlife, is how proud they were of him. And they were, Dick, we'd go to the bars and everybody would come up to Dick. Hey, I saw Darrell went 1 for 4. I saw he went 2 for 3. And he was always so nice to the people, you know, say, oh, thank you for caring and everything.
Till they laugh.
Yep. But
Yeah.
I just.
Well,
one
you know
thing
what?
that I'm
One
gathering.
thing,
Sure, go ahead, Darrell, please.
Let's think about, you know, and I think about this all the time. I didn't get to hear them, you know, they were sitting up at the stands with all, you know, other family, because I always had to get a bunch of tickets, and you know, everybody came to the game, which is a beautiful thing. I had my own rooting section, and I got 93 tickets in the World Series,
Oh
and
my
the
God.
only reason was because we played in San Diego, so there was enough. You know, it held so many people. If we were supposed to play the Cubs at the last minute in Wrigley, you know, nobody would have got to go except for, you know, my parents maybe. So
Yeah.
it was a blessing in so many different ways. But I always picture and go, I wonder what they were saying while they were watching me in the stands. You know, Bob was the kind of conduit to that, because he was, you know, he would tell me, and he was there. And like you said, when your parents are proud of you, man, there's nothing better than that. So, you know, you could take that with you no matter what. And it was like, you asked me before, was it that hard? And I was like, you know, yeah, of course it was, but I didn't think of it being hard. It was just because they were always the inspiration of, hey, you know what, you can do this. And so it's man, thanks for bringing some of that stuff up, Bob. I hadn't got to enjoy a good cry for a long time, you know, and I sit around doing that now even more, because I guess when you get older, you get more emotional, because people go, "Oh, you was never up and down." Well, that was a bunch of BS. Of course, I was.
Yeah.
I just could channel it, because I watched him, especially my dad, channel it. You know, and then sometimes it would come out, and you know, you feel bad, but then it was okay, because you're like, "Oh yeah, well, you know, if he yells at you, it doesn't really matter. Might be a really good thing." So I always had that. Always had that stopgap and break, blame it on him. You know, I didn't really, but you know, I've enjoyed so much lately of being able to just think about all that kind of stuff. Where before, life's hectic, and you don't really get to remember those kind of things. Although, you know, it's 40 years ago, which seems incredible, but it was
Darrell,
like yesterday.
what fascinates me in parent-child relationships is when your buddies think your parents are cool. That's awesome, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
And then when your boss thinks they're cool, and then
yeah.
he wants him that poker game, beer drinking, and then, not you, kid, not you, your dad.
Yeah,
I'm really glad you're here. That has to be one of the positions of honor that every kid would love to have some way, shape, or form. Would you do me a favor? You told me this one yesterday. Would you tell our audience very briefly the story about your mom and the elevator coming out of, was it Giants at Candlestick Park? And who did she get a chance to meet? Do you remember that one?
Oh yeah, well, you like I said, you know, I used to go to games, and then of course they loved it when I got traded to the Giants, because it was a quick flight, and they could come up a lot of weekends and stuff. Where, you know, in Atlanta they couldn't really do that a lot; they had to wait for us to come out there. But with the Giants, it was really great. And you know, I told you too, it was like, you know, I grew up like all of us, you know, grew up listening to Vince Scully and Jerry Doggett on the radio, and you know, you think back, and I didn't, you know, that's the way the world grew up. You know, that's how everybody listen to, you know, you're younger and stuff, so you had kind of TV, But we kind of, when we were growing up, there wasn't, no, just game of the week. That was it. And we had to watch the damn Yankees all the time. So, that's what we hated them. We wanted to see somebody else. And so we listened on the radio, the whole family got together. It was a big deal. When just listen for 5 minutes. It was like the whole game, talk about the game and all that kind of stuff. So when, my mom just adored, of course, Vinny, and she'd quote him all the time, and sometimes my dad, and I'd go, yeah, Mom, he doesn't really know that, because he'd make up stuff like what guys were saying. How would he know? But he was great at it, of course, and so when they were up there for a weekend and waiting outside for me, and the press boxes, you had to go up in an elevator to go to the press box in San Francisco. And so when I came out there and stuff, standing there with my mom and dad, and the elevator opens, and out walks Sandy Koufax. Oh my God. My mom, I can't give it justice. I mean, if she could have fainted, and I think she probably kind of did, just seeing him and screaming, or, kind of keeping the scream and everything else and all that kind of stuff. And he walked out and walked right up to her, because, they were standing next to me, and walked right up to her. No, you must be Mrs. Evans. Oh my God. It was the greatest thing to remember about what she enjoyed so much about it. And so, he was like, put his arm around her and like, oh yeah, I've heard so many good things about you, and your son's so great and all this kind of, I mean, it was so, because Sandy's, like you said, Sandy's always been such a classy act, always looked classy and everything, and so that was a thrill for sure. And, she just couldn't even talk. I mean, it's like she wasn't a crier too much, but man, she just couldn't take it much. And then out walks Vin Scully. Oh my God, a double dose. She I, I don't know how she didn't faint, but then and I don't know how she didn't scream, because she spent her whole life with a transistor radio to her ear, listening to Vin Scully describe what Major League Baseball was like. And then I came into the picture, and she got to enjoy that too. So that was such a special day. And of course, Vinny was the same way. Oh, Mrs. Evans, Mr. Evans. Vinny used to, and my dad, and all that kind of stuff. But Vinny used to always go, wow, his mom played professional softball, so she was always the one, when, well, he would get his hitting lessons from her and all this stuff. And my dad, well, Bob's laughing. My dad would be pissed, pretend pissed, but he'd go, bullshit. She had nothing to do with it. So, it was again them being enveloped in Major League Baseball, and it wasn't like, hey, can you come over and meet my parents? No, it's just the opposite. They can just like instantly we're like, oh, you must be them, and then the ultimate coup de grace was, Benny goes, can I interview your mom tomorrow on the radio on the Dodgers? Oh my God, what all? Oh shit! And she did okay. She was nervous, and again, like Benny goes, hey, everybody's nervous. It's okay, and you're not used to doing this and all that. So I don't know if she ever had a bigger thrill than that. I doubt it. I mean, maybe going to the World Series, of course, and then seeing a bunch of stuff, but that was more of a personal kind of thing that I got to watch, enjoy, and the classy people that did it. Just spontaneous. It was awesome.
That to me just it just puts a smile ear to ear.
Yeah.
Again, for all the right reasons, the great things about the game, your parents just being cool in the right place at the right time, and other people recognizing it. There's a mutual respect for everyone. And Sandy Koufax shakes your mom's hand and puts his arm around her. I'm sure your dad was a little jealous, maybe just a tiny little bit for a split second. But those are amazing stories that make the game. Passing it down from one generation to the other. And hey, you made it here. This is some of the amazing, cool stuff that takes place. You got to be a part of that.
Yeah, and the game was different then, because there was much more access to the players, and guys knew how to handle each other and all that kind of stuff. The security that goes on now, it's like, it's ridiculous. It's like These guys aren't anybody special, and nobody's threatening them. But I don't know. I guess they justify people's jobs and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, everybody likes athletes. I remember when when the 9/11 and all that kind of stuff was, and then the PGA guys were all worried about them needing security. Somebody on the golf course was gonna, like thinking, oh, nobody thinks that. They're terrorists. They don't know anything about golf, I guess. But they built up that kind of stuff, and like I said, they've taken away the enjoyment. You can't really sign autographs. We before the game, and people don't understand. We don't have that much time. We're out there getting ready for work, and so we can go sign a few and all that kind of stuff. Well, then the person that doesn't get the autograph sometimes is like, oh, see, they don't like us and all. But you know what? We can't help that. But we always knew how important it was because we were one of those kids. We were one of those kids. I remember getting autographs from people, but I just get a torn piece of paper, and and you get the autograph. It wasn't so much it wasn't even for the autograph. It was just to be on in their presence, to see how they were, how they treated you. You knew which ones were friendly, you knew which ones that always came over there and stuff. So that was part of learning how to act in the game, and they don't cultivate that as much. They should, because it's the fans are the ones that we're entertainers in the long run. It's a hard thing. It's harder than any other entertainment game. Like I said, hitting that ball with a blank, and then then you got 9 world-class athletes trying to catch that ball, and you have no control where it goes. You try to hit over their head. Another Eddieism. If you're gonna make sure you get a hit, you got to hit it over everybody's head. So, but we didn't have the restriction of we could talk to the fans, or we could and high five them, and because they're so excited. They come to the game for you. They come to the game to experience it. And if they get to meet one person, they have that story for their whole life.
Yep.
And I get to hear that now, even. We go to places, and people get recognized once in a while. Or go to, we do cart shows, we do all kinds of things, so people can come in and get our autographs, but we get to talk to them for a couple minutes and stuff like that. Some guys aren't. They just sign. They don't even say. And you realize, remember how it was when you were growing up, and what you would do to just be around, or ask somebody a question, or get a high five from somebody. It would be something you would remember the rest of your life. So that was a real easy sell to everybody. And and as a veteran, you reminded people of that. You watched them. You watched how they treated how they treated a fan. And then, if you didn't like it, you go up to them and go, hey, you know what? Don't let that ever happen, because you're representing us. That's not the way it's supposed to be. That's not the way my mom and dad told me it was. So it's we get all those rewards. I'm sure you do. You're recognized and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, wow. It's like, yeah. And they go, oh yeah, my family, you were their favorite. You were the one. Yeah, we remember we went to your first game. Went to the game the first time we went to a game. You did this. You did. And you're like, wow, didn't know that. I've got, I don't know, a few kids named after me, and you just like going, oh, maybe should have decided that later. But we kind of get to enjoy that for a whole life, which is what I do now. Where like Bob always kids and goes, what inning are we in? I don't know. Hopefully I'm not in the bottom of the ninth yet. Maybe we got a doubleheader to play. And then we know that, like Field of Dreams, when we're done, they promised us that, hey, man, we're going to go up there and we're going to feel good again. And I remember the last time I saw my good buddy, Phil Nieker, talked to him on the phone, just a really close friend. Played with him 7 years there, 8 years in Atlanta, and then played against him all the time. And we always had our great rivalry, or, trying to beat up each other and all that kind of stuff. And we were talking, and I go, you know what? The great thing about it, and, he pitched 24 years or 25 years. And, I'd kid him all the time because he was ancient and all that kind of stuff, and still could pitch because of knuckleball. And I told him, I go, yeah, well, shoot, man, you're going to be able to he was sick, and I was like, yeah, pretty soon you're going to be able to pitch to Babe Ruth again. He's, fuck you, But, I think that's our destiny. And we got to entertain people, and that's what people want to know. And that's what, that's what we got this, keep living your life and keep giving back and keep enjoying it, trying to get the game better. The game's what gave everybody. And we didn't make up the game. It was played 200 years ago. Isn't it crazy how long this has been played? And then they changed the rules now. They changed the rules in the last 10 years. They didn't change the rules for 150 years, and now they got to change it. It makes no sense.
Well, the fun thing about what you just mentioned a moment ago, and my connection and my way of saying thank you, is my son, Joshua, 10 or 11 years old. Phil Necro's at the park. He's watching his 12 or 13-year-old grandson, and he walks over and he teaches my son how to grip a knuckleball. Because I told him, I said to my kid, right, I go, listen, this is one of the greatest pitchers in Major League history, and you learn everything that he tells you. Phil, can you do me a favor? Takes 10 seconds. And he gave it to him. He gave my son the 10 seconds, if you know what I mean. He signed a ball for me, and the gift that keeps on giving. So my story about Phil Necro is what a great man he was. And just like you, Darrell, you gave stuff, and eventually, hopefully, everyone will start doing that again, and the game grows because of that. Darrell, I want to be respectful of your time. So, Bob, you have any final thoughts here before we let Darrell go for the day?
My final thoughts, it was so good to spend this time with both of you, and if there's anything better in the world, it's what's better than memories, especially good memories, you know what I mean? And I apologize for getting a little emotional, but it just brought back a lot of stuff. So it's just been a great time for me. And Darrell, I love you, buddy. And my grandkids are gonna be with them in about a few days.
Yeah, a couple days.
So in Dallas, they're going to SMU. So my daughter's gonna hang out with Darrell and the grandkids. But anyway, I love you, Darrell, and I love you, Harper. You did an amazing job bringing out some wonderful stories. I thought those. I mean, I've known this guy my whole life, and I'm entertained. You know what I mean? I feel like I was. There's not any game I could have watched that would have been more enjoyable than just listening to this. So thank you both.
Well, Darrell, pleasure. Any final thoughts from you, my friend?
Well, yeah, we talked yesterday and all that kind of stuff, and it was so apparent that you love sports and you get on how that is. Going back to Phil Necro and all those people that I got to play with in I think the best era. I don't know. There's no way you could kind of compare eras, I guess. But man, I had to face 29 Hall of Fame pitchers. So, I got to look back and go, oh, okay, I got lucky a few times, but it was because I was compelled to compete. And we all grew up in an era or a place where nobody was famous and rich going into the game. No, I mean, hardly anybody. I mean, the 99% of the people were just, you'd say, regular is not the right word, but just regular people that got to do extraordinary things. And imagine, people that lived on farms and stuff became major league players, football players. The people that had no contact of what they did, but they loved what they did and they went for it and they got so good that nobody could stop them. They had to get them uniforms, like I said. So, it was such a great era. I think that's changed a lot because look at, like you said, you kids. So, they got these immaculate fields. I remember some of the fields we used to play on, and we played in parking lots or in vacant lots, right? With glass, and we had to clear out the free place and all that. That's how much we loved this stuff. So when you got to the top, you weren't different. You were still that same kid, and you appreciated all that. And then you met all these other people for the same thing, and you go, oh man, they look a little different. Maybe they sound a little different. Sometimes you need a translator because it's like, they talk the same, but they all acted the same. And all of a sudden we're all friends, and it's a beautiful thing, and it's great the memories you can and for somebody, and especially Bob, you know, I know Bob for Solar, but it's great that you have that appreciation, well, because you went through it and all that kind of stuff. But you know, and we know that that's what people think of you, and I know what people think of Bob, and I know what people think of you now. And you know, it could be better. I mean, we all gravitate to that because the alternative is, why in the world do we let those people in our world? You know, why would we even let them have 5 minutes of our time to be negative? And so, you know, people are so positive about so many things, and so many wonderful things are happening. You just want to enjoy them. And, you know, I think about before Bob, before we, you know, before we go, we're probably closer than most people are. But you know what? I'm gonna, you know, milk everything I can out of that. So, you know, when I come on shows like this, man, it's fun to hear about stuff. So it's fun to hear about what people think of you, and you know, it means a lot. So thank you for having me, and being patient and all that kind of stuff. So, God, it's so much fun. What a great picture that is. And you know, I always wear my ring so that people get to see it and they appreciate it so much. So you get to share that.
Well, we didn't get to hear about probably 90% of some of the really cool things that you were a part of in baseball history. We'd love to have you back, Darrell. If that's all right with you, we'll work it out before this season is over, and we'll talk about some of the major league. I was very fortunate. I got to play with 13 Hall of Famers in my career, and it makes it special. But you know what? As much as all of that, I still remember the thistles that got on my socks from playing on a field that was full of weeds. Yeah. I still remember the brand new pair of pants that my mom swore to me. She goes, if you put a hole in the knees of that pants, don't even come home. And it wasn't even after the first inning that I'd slide on asphalt and get glass in my knee. You know that.
Sure.
You learn to love the game because you played it at the best and at the worst levels possible, and you worked all the way through it. So it would be our honor to have you back, Darrell, anytime. We didn't even talk about Hank and the home run. We will do that another time.
Yeah,
and Bob, thank you so much. I know you have a plethora of amazing people that you've known, and if this is just a tidbit of what we're going to get with the sporting page of Bob Case, I can't wait to have
this is going to be one of the
real quick, guys, before we go.
Yeah.
We want to say thank you to all the great folks that are helping out on this show. And occasionally you need someone to help you recruit really good guys like Darrell Evans or Bob Case. And if you're in the need for a needle in a haystack from a business perspective, and you're looking through thousands of resumes, let ZipRecruiter help you out. ZipRecruiter will help you find amazing candidates, top-level performers, and they will help you do so quickly. You can match their smart technology with your talent needs and do so in a way that is beneficial to you. So you can ditch the other hiring sites, find ZipRecruiter, and let them help you find what you're looking for. The top talent, the #1 draft pick, the Hall of Famer. 4 out of 5 employers who use ZipRecruiter find quality candidates within the first day. Now you can try it for free. Go to ZipRecruiter.com/audio, AUDIO, ZipRecruiter.com/audio, and they will be happy to assist you in your business. Gentlemen, I appreciate everything that you did for today. And folks, this is just the first of many shows that Bob Case wants to be a part of here on 100 Yards of Football. I'm so grateful that I got to be a part of it as well. So we want to welcome you to the sporting page with Bob Case. And now we're going to just say goodbye to everybody. We appreciate you being part of the show. Have a fantastic rest of your day.